midnight. I felt bad that she didn't tell her husband. I mean, sometimes we tell little teeny lies, like, well, just like how much you spent on a dress, that kind of thing. You know, well, I mean, I kind of do, but you know, sometimes they don't need to know, right? But
Right.
this was like a big one, and yeah, it was just wonderful. Thank you for a great story, and a lot of the details that we don't know about, as someone previously said about, getting Ruth's hair done and that kind of thing. But anyway, I loved it. I want everybody else to talk because everybody else has got questions too. I don't want to be the only one.
I appreciate that. And thanks for mentioning the cultural touch points, because I
Yeah.
did wrestle with that, how to do that, because I wanted this to appeal to, multiple audiences. But I wanted Black readers to see themselves in the story. And I've had so many say, yeah, I feel so seen. And yeah, that's so familiar to me. But I also didn't want it to be foreign to non-Black readers as well. So it was a bit of wrestling with how to do that, like the things with the hair. Like when I mentioned the kitchen of the hair, and I had to say the kitchen, comma, the coarse hair, I believe at the nape of the neck, for readers who may not understand that. So I'm glad that worked for you as well.
Well, I know Megan had a question about hope and trauma.
Thank you so much for this book. I'm Megan over here. Yeah, I mean, I ate through this book. I loved it from the second it started. And so I have like a million questions, but I'm gonna limit it to so I work as a trauma therapist. I feel like I say that every time, like when people say they go to Harvard, we're good. But I read all of the books kind of accidentally with that in the back of my mind. And there's this element of like, I was at Obama's inauguration, like I was in all of that energy, that description of the scene of them and, being worried and joyful all at the same time. But the actual description of everything in there is hope, right? Like he ran on hope. And I was wondering, like, was that partly to place us in time, or was the aspect of here are all of these traumatized people? And in trauma, what we talk about is like hope is actually the third rail. It's the scariest thing for people who are trying to heal, is the belief, there has to be this like tipping point where there's the belief that things can be different. And there's often a ton of resistance around that, or fear around that, because, if I believe that things can be better or different, then, it could also be much, much worse. I know how to live this way, but I'm not sure, as I'm talking, I'm like, yes. And then we elected Donald Trump. So, I'm just curious about the mechanism of the idea of hope, because when I see her need to go and rectify this situation in order to let herself hope or want for other children, it's just this undercurrent. So I'm not even asking an articulate question, but you're nodding. So I think you know what
I'm nodding because you're exactly right. I was very intentional about the whole theme of hope. And that is why I started with the election night party, because it was this feeling of hope that was almost palpable for people. I think for so many, regardless of your political persuasion, but particularly for the Black community. And in that opening scene, you hear Ruth and Xavier, her husband Xavier, talking about having a child. And I think for some, it's like, this is the perfect environment of hope to bring a child into at a time when the country is moving forward and is making such great progress with race relations. But then after those opening scenes of celebration, you see what happens when there's the dearth of hope, when you lose hope. And that's what the rest of the book is about, is that loss of hope. And you already knew that, that we were on the verge of that happening because we were going through the Great Recession. So people were struggling financially. And then when you've got the economic scarcity, I think that exacerbates the racial tensions. And so we saw, the impact of what happens when there's a loss of it. And also I wanted to explore, there's this false sense of hope too. I think that some had, it was that fallacy that we were post-racial. because we had a Black president. And clearly we're not, and all you have to do is look at the last 4 years, and what we're going through now to see that that was definitely not the case. And so I was interested in showing that fallacy as well.
I loved it. I think it worked perfectly. And I saw it sort of like reflected in little micro places, like even with Midnight and, places where like, no, hope really can be damaging versus hope as a vehicle for change and healing. So I'm glad to hear that what I was reading in there was intentional. And I think it just worked super beautifully.
And I wanted to come full circle too. And so you saw at the end of the book, I wanted to at least have somewhat of a hopeful ending. I think there was ambiguity at the end that frustrates some readers because they're like, where did things go? What's going to happen to Midnight? What will happen to Corey? And so I left those things, open-ended, but you had the celebration again at the end. And so there was a feeling that some things are going to get better and that there is reason still to hope in the midst of this kind of turmoil.
We're here for a sequel, by the way. We already talked about it. So feel free.
Yeah, that's fun. Hopefully there'll be like a, movie or TV series someday. That's what I would dream of. That would be ideal. And I could see that really breathing new life into this story.
Has it not been optioned yet?
No options. So maybe somebody here, can call Hollywood for us. But I do have a TV film agent who's shopping it around. So fingers crossed that something like that could happen someday.
Awesome. Okay, who would like to ask the next question? Everybody was talking up a storm before, so don't be shy.
Nancy, I'm Julie. And that's not helpful. I just realized I identified myself like I'm in this square, but
here I'm gonna hold on. I'm adding the spotlight. There you go.
Perfect. Great. I really enjoyed your book. I loved, a couple things. I think that I loved that your reference to the title is on the first page. Something about that I just loved it. I felt like as a reader, it kind of directed me and I wasn't wondering at any point where the title was from. Was that chosen early on?
Actually, it wasn't early on. I had another title and it was Until Midnight, which was not as good. But this was when I was workshopping excerpts of the novel.
Okay.
I was doing that with Laura Lippman at a writing workshop. So you guys know the crime fiction writer, Laura Lippman. She's wonderful. And she saw that title and she's like, no, that cannot work. And she said, you never want to use the name of a character to support the title like that. And so she just thought it was kind of a cheap, way to do it. And I'm so glad that she said it because then I abandoned that immediately. Right. And so then the next title I came up with was The Kindest Lie. And I kept thinking someone's going to change that, once I get an agent, and then once I get the book deal, the editor might make that change, and it stuck. And so no one ever questioned the title, and it works on a few levels. It's like you said, I explained it in the very beginning, what the title was about, but it's about the lies that we tell ourselves and then we tell each other as well for some of the best reasons or for the best of intentions. We're not doing it in a malicious way to hurt anybody. We're doing it, to help, in our own misguided way sometimes of helping. And I think also on the macro level, it works because it's about the lies that America has told itself about how kind and decent it has been to marginalized communities.
That makes total sense. And I loved it for all those reasons. And I think we've been talking about, when I was reading the book, I felt so much tension with the characters, and Megan has apparently therapied me through that during our book club here, which is perfect. I feel like I've worked through a lot. But what it was I really, for myself as a person, I'm always shooting for wholeness, right? And I think most of us are, but I think that was what was killing me with some of these characters, was feeling like they were lying to themselves. They were hiding from themselves or hiding these parts from others. And that was really hard for me to read. I think mostly, obviously, I'm over-identifying with them, but I loved that part of it. And you wrote them so well that it was easy for me to do that, to really feel just sort of gutted by their inability to own all those parts. So I loved that. If for you as the writer, was there a top message that you wanted people to walk away with?
Yeah, not really a message, because what I didn't want
Yeah.
was to be didactic or moralistic. I wanted people
Yes.
to read it as a story and to fall in love with the story and the characters more than anything. And then if there is some message that you get from that, then I think that is a beautiful thing. But the one thing I did want was for people to read it and to experience the life of somebody you may not know, and walk in the shoes of somebody else, and see the world through their lens. I think that is the most powerful thing. So whether you're a white reader reading it and understanding at least one piece of the Black experience, this is not representative of all of Black America by any means, or if you're a Black reader and you're understanding the perspective of Midnight and his family, and that may not be a world that you're as familiar with, and a perspective that you know. And so that's the main thing that I was wanting to do with these characters. And that's why I created the characters of Ruth and Midnight, who on the face of it are so very different, yet they still have some things in common. This shared humanity, shared need for belonging, love, connection. So that was the reason that I created these particular characters, and just thought that would help people to see the world anew.
Yeah, I love that. And everything that you're saying, I just want you to know, listening to what you just said, those are all the things we were discussing. Like, you achieved all those goals, I feel like, and the message versus what people are doing in it. The story was so much more powerful, and you did it very well. So thank you.
I appreciate it, Julie. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Carolyn.
Hi, Nancy. I'm so glad you're here today. It's so cool to hear all these backstories behind everything. It's amazing, and I loved your book. I'm curious to hear if there were people in your actual real life or people that you've read about that inspired any of the characters.
Great question. And your name looks familiar. I feel like we've corresponded on.
I wrote something to you on Instagram today.
Yeah, I'll say I recognize your name. So it's good to see you here.
Me too.
Appreciate it. So these characters were not inspired by anybody in particular in my own life, but I think because I'm the author, I bring my experiences to the characters. And so, believe it or not, the character that I'm most like, I would say, is actually Midnight. Surprisingly,
Yeah.
because I was bullied as a kid. I wrote about that in an essay for the Oprah magazine in the November 2015 issue, about being bullied in 3rd grade. And so I understood or understand what it's like to stand on the outside of things, looking in, and what it is to have this desperate need to be accepted and to belong. And so then when I wrote the character of Midnight, I infused him with those emotions. So we didn't have a similar upbringing by any means, but it was the emotions. And that's what I tried to glom onto, was that emotional core. And I was able to connect with that. Of course, my life is somewhat similar to Ruth's, just being a Black woman in America, a Black professional, in the sense of having a foot in 2 different worlds, and just trying to find your footing in both, and not necessarily being as grounded as you would like to be in the 2 worlds. And so that's something that I definitely brought to the character of Ruth. And then the others are probably just composites of different people I've known over the years and experiences that I've had. But yeah, they're not really based on anybody in particular. But I was very intentional about some of the elements of the characters, like Ruth being a chemical engineer, for example. That was something that was like, quite often you don't often see Black chemical engineers on the page. You probably don't see many chemical engineers on the page, but certainly not Black ones. And so that's something I wanted to show, that there are all kinds of professions and experiences of being Black in America. And I did struggle with how I would represent my own community. I wanted to do that well in the writing of this book. I probably put too much pressure on myself and feeling that awesome responsibility, because I know the power of representation and what that means. And so that's something I thought a lot about, because Ruth is a teen mother. She had her baby at 17, and I kept thinking, am I perpetuating a stereotype of black teen mothers. Same thing with Eli. Eli was, one of my favorite characters to write. And I thought, okay, he's out of work and he doesn't have his children with him. Am I perpetuating a stereotype of a deadbeat dad in the Black community? And I didn't want to do any of those things. But what I did and what I realized was that I could create these complex, fully rounded characters, and that's the way to do it. And that one character is not going to represent all of what it means to be Black in America. And that can't happen in any particular book. But I think there's so much more pressure for a Black author writing Black characters, because when you think about white characters, you could have a white teen mom or deadbeat dad or, drug addict, whatever, because there are already so many other representations that are positive of what it means to be white in America.
What an incredible answer. And I love hearing and knowing that they're not really based on any one particular person makes me that much more impressed. And I also have to just say that Eli was really funny. I mean, he had some great dialogue, and I mean, like laugh out loud dialogue too. So
thank you. I'm glad you connected with Eli. I really love that character. And I'm working on a second novel, and my editor said to me, because I have several male characters in this new book I'm writing, and she said, I wouldn't be mad if one of the characters was a little bit like Eli.
that's great. And I also love the Chicago stuff because I'm from Chicago. So
Oh, good. Yeah, Chi-town. Yes.
Chicago. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn.
Okay, who'd like to go next?
I was,
Jill.
hi,
sorry.
Nancy. I'm also a writer from Chicago, although I'm newly in Chicago, and I wanted to thank you, first of all, for telling me that you were bullied in third grade, because my granddaughter is now in third grade and she's being bullied. So I can tell her that she can grow up to be like you.
Aw.
Oh, I love that. And it's so much more difficult now with the social media. I can't imagine being bullied in this era, but yep, she will get over it. But when you're in the middle of it, you feel like it's never going to end. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's sort of heartbreaking as a parent or grandparent. But I loved your book. I think you're really a super talented writer, and the story was so meaningful. So I want to know, what was the hardest part about writing this book? What was the hardest? I mean, you did mention that you struggled with yourself about representing your community, and I so appreciate it. And by the way, I didn't think there were any stereotypes. I mean, not at all. But what was the hardest part in terms of writing the book? The hardest part for you?
Yeah, so that part that I did talk about with representation, that was hard for me personally, as a Black author, to write these characters. But I think just the climax scene, that was one. And so when I say the climax scene, that would be the scene at the river with Ruth and Midnight and Corey. Just getting that right. I had to rewrite that multiple times. And when I work with my editor, she was more interested in, just building up the suspense of it. But even before I got the book deal, I was struggling with how to render that particular scene, because I knew it was going to be pivotal. So many of the elements of the story were going to converge in that one moment. And I will tell you all this, because I think everybody's read the book, but so I did have versions of this book, iterations of it, where I killed Corey. Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't kill him.
Yeah. So
That would have been
I've written several versions where I did have that. And so I was like, well, then I thought about it and I thought, I don't need to do that. For one thing, at that point in the book, it's near the end, it's at the climax scene, I'm going to open a jurisprudence issue. And so that we're going to have to deal with a murder having been committed, and then, who's going to, pay for that? Will somebody be prosecuted? And I just didn't want to open all that up near the end of the book. And also, I wasn't interested in a murder. It was more about the emotional layers And I wanted some of the secrets that had been withheld so long to be revealed. And none of that would have mattered in terms of who Corey's biological mother was, and finding out the truth and the way he found it out. None of that would have happened if he had been killed. And so I just decided that that wasn't the way to go. So yes, I just tried different things with that and wanted to get that right. And then the other difficult part was the actual ending, and I talked earlier about the ending scene and coming back to that place of hope. I didn't want to tie it up too neatly with a bow. And so I was wrestling with how to do that well. Yet I wanted the ending to feel inevitable for people, but not answer all the questions. I wanted you to wonder and imagine what comes next for these characters. And so I think that from talking to readers, that sounds like that's the case, and that I achieved that. And so those were the things that I think were the most difficult.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Carol.
I think
I
Jill
was,
was
I,
asking, wait, I think, where did Jill go?
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, Nancy. First of all, thank you so much for this book. I mean, I loved it, and it sounds like everyone in this book club was very enthusiastic about it too. And one of the things we were talking about before you came on was the role that Midnight plays in the narrative. And I'm curious, as a writer, how you came to decide on the two POV structure, and especially now that you say that you relate more to the Midnight character, how did the novel evolve for you writing it? Did you always have your heart set on Ruth and Midnight, or at a certain point did you realize this was the right choice, and if so, why?
Well, thanks for that question, Jill. As a writer, there have been so many iterations, and it's changed so much over time. I always had the character of Ruth, and then Midnight was next. But in an initial version of this book, well, not the full book, but I'd say maybe 5 or 6 chapters. So first 5 or 6 chapters of my first draft of this, Midnight was black. And so I was telling the same story, but similar story, but with Midnight being black. And then I switched it to Midnight being white, because I knew that what I was really trying to explore was that racial divide at the time of Obama's election, this chasm between Black and white America. And I thought that it'll be a lot more compelling to do that with Midnight as a white boy. And also it opens up the opportunity to explore his family too, get the grandmother and his father. And it just gave me more to work with in exploring that particular story. Another thing that was different in terms of writing choices was I initially had 4 POV or point of view characters. So I was telling it from the perspectives of Ruth and Midnight, which you have now, as well as Mama and Eli. And then when I started querying literary agents, I was getting the feedback that I needed to focus it more, on just the main 2 characters. But I think it was still beneficial that I wrote it from those additional point of view characters, because then I understood Mama and Eli so much more, because I had written several drafts with their point of view expressed. And so then I think when you read it now and you get to know Mama and Eli through the eyes of Ruth, those other characters are more fleshed out because I spent more time developing them as characters. But to answer the question about the choice of these 2 people, Ruth, or characters, they're like people to me, but Ruth and Midnight, I was interested in the nuances of race and class, and I just thought of them as characters that could help me to interrogate that. For one, just the differences between them and just how different they were with race and class. So you have Ruth, who is this affluent, successful engineer. However, she's still a Black woman in America. She's still having trouble on her job, getting promotions or getting the assignments that she believes she deserves. She's got a certain degree of privilege and money, but she's still sitting on the L train with her husband, Xavier, and they're rigid with fear when there's a white cop hassling a Black boy. So those things are still true. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got Midnight, who is this poor, kid. His father's just lost his job at the auto plant, so they're struggling financially. Yet Midnight is still able to move through Ganson a lot more freely than his Black and brown friends and classmates can. And so to me, that was very interesting to juxtapose these two characters and looking at race and class and privilege and what that means.
That makes sense. And I love that you originally had those other two perspectives, because I think that does come out in the text. They come out as such well-rounded characters, and it's because you know all the backstory. You've written it, right? You didn't have to put it on the page, but we could tell that it was in there. So
yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And at first I was kind of upset, like, oh my God, I wasted all this time, writing those and then having to scrap it all. But then later I realized, as you said, the value of that, because then that backstory and that understanding of those characters really informed how they appear on the page through Ruth's point of view.
Okay, last question. This is going way too fast.
I know. It's fun.
Does anybody want to ask the last question quickly?
All right, the closer.
The closer, Cheryl, did you want to go? Sherry? Go ahead. Wait, are you muted? Hold on. Hold on, you're muted.
Got it. Could you explain how you chose Midnight's name? Because it was always very confusing to me because he was white, but you chose Midnight.
I know. Yeah, there were some people who said, yeah, they kept seeing him as black.
Yes.
For part of the book. I know.
Yeah, especially in the beginning.
In the beginning, yeah, it was kind of hard to get that straight. I like the idea of a nickname because for one thing, like he said, I'm not, when I think his real name is Patrick, and he's like, when I think of Patrick's, it's a certain kind of kid, with a certain kind of pullover sweater. And it just wasn't, he never felt, it was also part of the identity thing, not a crisis, but what he was dealing with that identity issue and not really feeling like himself or like he belonged. And the name Patrick was just part of the identity that his family had put on him, but he never felt at home as Patrick. And so he was always searching. And so I think the nickname is part of finding his own sense of identity. And then as I have in the book, you learn how that nickname actually came to be. And the fact that that's something that the Black kids that he was hanging around with or trying to hang around with in school gave him that name because he was this little white boy trying to act Black. Okay. And so that was how he got the nickname. Yeah. Of course, it's a name that his father would never call him that,
Sorry, I didn't mean to remove her that quickly. Sorry.
All right.
Here, I'll, hi. Okay, well, we're almost over. Could you just in the last 1 minute give us any preview into your next book?
Sure. I'm so excited. So I have a book deal, another one with William Morrow, HarperCollins. And so the next book is called People of Means. And so it should be coming out sometime in 2023. And it's so interesting that it took me 6 years to write The Kindest Lie. And now my editor wants this next book by January. Oh my goodness. So I have a lot of work to do to get that one done. But yeah, it's People of Means. It's a dual timeline. And so I'm exploring 1960 and 1992. And so it's following an affluent Black mother and daughter at different national moments of racial reckoning. So the mother is coming of age in 1960 as a student at Fisk University in Nashville at the time of the sit-ins during the Civil Rights Movement. And then her daughter is coming of age in 1992 in Chicago, but heavily influenced by the LA riots when the 4 white officers were acquitted in the beating of Rodney King. And so it's about love and purpose and identity and the way these women look at resistance.
Love it.
I'm excited about it, yeah.
Nancy, thank you so much for coming. Here, I'll remove everybody's spotlight here so everyone can see you. Remove, wait, not me. Hold on. Hold on, wait, remove spotlight. Okay, is that better? Can everybody see? Okay, I just want everybody to give you a round of applause. Oh, my kids are coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Have a great day.
Thank you, Nancy.
Bye.
It was
Thank
terrific.
Thank you. Guys.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, look at
Thank you.
Buddy.
Bye. Okay, bye.